Okay, I meet with people every day, all day, on awakening. That's what I do. That's all that I do these days, other than live my life and take 2 days off a week and have fun. But, and I've been doing this for years, and the thing through the years, what I keep seeing is that no matter how many times I meet with people, or they talk about their path, or they talk about whatever, if they still believe in separation, if they're still experiencing separation, something feels incomplete about their awakening. And I just have not found any exceptions to that, because people keep coming back, and the reason every time I see it, it's because there's some belief in separation still operating. So that's why I just started talking about this whole thing differently and just focusing not on even on awareness. Awareness is part of it, or not even no self, but just the belief in separation, no matter where that shows up. So I just started talking about objects. The reason I use the word objects is it could be anything. Think of anything as an object. It could be the self. It could be other. It could be enlightenment as a temporal object, or a temporal object, however you say the word. Something in time, some object in time, like happiness or fame or something in the future as an object that I have to reach. Or just, again, it could be something here like a drug, a person, something like acceptance. So it could be a hard physical object, or it could just be sort of like a soft, fuzzy, vague object. But the point is that what I kept seeing is that as long as people have this belief in separation, it's like a recipe for seeking towards the thing, or suffering of some sort, or conflict with the thing. And so when it comes right down to it, I can tell people what so many other people say, which is just relax as awareness. You can say that. And that can go a long way. But the problem is that even when people relax as awareness, they still think that they're experiencing separation often. So it might be something out there, or there might be some body identification. That's one that I keep seeing. And I just feel that non-dual awakening, it has to be thorough. It can't always be a present exploration. It can always be now, looking now. It should always be now, and not a future thing. But it has to go deep, in my experience. So that's why I came up with this inquiry that I do with people. And I have not yet put it on video, because it's really something that you have to do yourself, and you have to kind of understand what it is that I'm doing before you can even try. Because people, I've done this with people, and then they've tried to do it on their own, and then they come back, and I find out they're not even doing what it is that I said. So it gets kind of confusing, because this is a bit different than some of the inquiries that you've seen before. There's just some different things in it. Okay, but let's just start with the first object, the self. Remember that in this inquiry, there are just three things that you're going to find: thoughts, feelings, and sensations, or thoughts, emotions, and sensations. So in this inquiry, you're never going to find anything outside of that. Okay? With respect to thoughts, there's just going to be two kinds of thoughts. They're going to be pictures and words. Pictures are literally mental images in your mind, like a picture of a face, or a picture of some event in the future. It's just literally a drawing in the mind. And words are just words. It's the voice in your head that's always commenting with words, like, I went to the store. I am seeking enlightenment. Those are words. So thoughts always come in those two ways. So when you're looking for the self, yet before you look, you have to get a real sense of how you feel like a separate self. Don't just think of it in terms of story, because if you really look at your experience, being a separate self is not just a story. It feels, for most people, more visceral. There's an emotional component to it. There are definitely emotions that come up that are being identified with, that I say is me, that come up with the thoughts. And there's also just like this felt physical sense of being inside a body, like separate, literally physically cut off from my environment and from other people and things. So before you start the inquiry, you really have to get a sense of what that separate self feels like. Like it has an inherent nature to it, like it's inherently here and separate, physical. Now, once you get that object of the self in your experience, and you're really clear that that's what you're trying to find, you're trying to find that self that exists that way, then all you do is you go looking for it. And the traditions have always said things like, just witness thoughts and emotions come and go. And that can be very powerful. Except for sometimes it just doesn't go deep enough. Because people are witnessing pockets of separation. They're witnessing thought and emotion coming up together, but they're not seeing that there are two things in there, you could say. There are thoughts and there are emotions. And they're like different arisings. So oftentimes they're witnessing a storm of thought and feeling that feels welded together. So that kind of witnessing is just sort of witnessing a sense of separation. It's not breaking through the separation. It's not seeing through it. It's just witnessing it as this separate self sense. And that's why witnessing sometimes doesn't go far enough. So with this inquiry, you have to remember there's only one question. The question is this it? 3 words. Is this it? So what you're doing is you're pulling up things one at a time that feel like that they might be the separate self that you're trying to find. And when you pull it up, it's like pulling it up and putting it under a light and looking at it. You're looking at it through direct observation. You're not trying to think about what it is. You're just looking at it as a bird would look at a worm, just staring without thought, observing. But you're asking the question, is that it? There's only 2 answers. It's either yes or no. There's no reason to analyze. The way that I explain this to people is when you're rummaging through a closet and you're looking for shoes. If you pick up socks, you don't analyze why the socks are not the shoes. You just pull the socks to the side so that you can find the shoes. So again, just yes or no. And there's definitely no right or wrong answer. Even though the point is to see that there is no self, sometimes when you pull something up and it feels like a self, and you say, yes, that's it, it's important to go into that, to go deeper, so that you can see through it. So this will be a couple of videos to get through this probably. So start with your name. And when I say your name, I literally mean the letters of your name, like Tim. It's like there's a typewriter in the head. Do you see the letters Tim? Okay, the question, is that it? If that's not it, if you see that that's just 3 letters, then just let it relax. And let's move to the next thing. Now pull up a memory of yourself doing something in your life that has an emotional component to it, like that really feel like either good or bad emotion, like that really feels like that's you, something that really was bad that happened or something really good. But pull it up as this memory here. I'll give you a second. Do you have it? Look straight at the memory. It's a picture. Remember how I said words and pictures? That's a picture. The word Tim was a word. This is a picture. You can see the memory of yourself. Is that it? Is that the self? If it's not it, it's like the socks. You let it float on by because you're looking for the shoes. So you let the memory float on by so you can try to look for the self. But let's just imagine, though, that memory brings up some emotion in the body, and so therefore it feels like you. It feels like that's it. And here's one of the most important things about this inquiry. Whenever a thought, either a word or a picture, feels like the separate self, it means that something is happening in the body, a sensation or an emotion. So with the picture, if that feels like you, it just means there's some emotion that came up with it, and the picture and the emotion are welded together. And that's where the identification happens. So most people have difficulty, many people do, being in their body and experiencing emotions directly. So this inquiry sort of forces you into the body so that you begin to see through the self. So if that memory feels like you, remember the rule is, that means there's some sensation or emotion in the body. So go into the body and feel what that feeling is or sensation that came up with that picture. Just feel into it. Now obviously if I were doing this with you, and it's best to do it one-on-one, but we would take it with whatever emotion came up for you. So we would go into that particular emotion. But because I'm talking to a camera, we can't do that. So let's just imagine that when you went into the body, what you felt was like a sadness. And so it was that feeling of sadness and that picture that came together that gave you this sense of a separate self, okay? So once you get into the body, you have to, once you label the emotion, sadness, just deal with the label first, because you really want to find the self. So you ask yourself, is that word, here's another word, is the word sadness, literally the letters typed out in the typewriter in your head, is that word it? Most people agree that the word sadness is not the self, it's just the word sadness. So the word is then pointing to an energy in the body. So relax the word sadness. And now we're going to go deeper into feeling. And the way to do that is to relax all pictures and all words. And just to experience the energy of the body without any labels and stories and interpretations. Just sit with it, letting the energy be there as it is. It may change, it may morph. But eventually, when you're not adding a story to it, it starts to relax. It might expand, but it begins to sort of dissipate. If a thought comes up in the middle of that, just kind of notice it and let it pass. Go back into the feeling. The point is once the feeling begins to run its course and then start to dissipate, as it's dissipating and relaxing back into presence, you can just ask the question, is that it? Is that energy it? If it's not it, then you just let the energy relax because you're looking for the self and you haven't found it yet. Okay? But here's the other rule. Just as if there's a thought that feels like the self, the rule is that means there's some feeling or sensation that came up with it. The reverse is true. If you're experiencing a feeling and it feels like that's the self, it just means that there's a thought that comes with it, which means a word or picture. So if that feeling of sadness, as it was coming through, if that felt like you just have to look into your experience and see that there's a subtle word or picture that's kind of welded still with the emotion. That's why there's an identification as a self. So just look for the word or the picture, whatever it is, and then ask yourself, is that word or picture by itself it? And you can see that it's just a word or it's just a picture, and then that can relax. And that helps you get back into the feeling in the body. And when you're finally there with the feeling, without any words or pictures, it's clear that that feeling is not the self, it's just energy. And then that can relax. And so then what you do is you go through all of the other pictures and words that might feel like the self and go through that process until you realize you can't find the self. And then you just say, well, where is it? And you look. But you don't look through analysis. You look through present, direct observation, like a child would look for an Easter egg. You look in the space of the present moment, and you look without thought, and see if you can find it. And what you come up with is like an emptiness. Now a thought may come through that says, but there's still a self there, but you can ask, is that thought it? And go through the whole thing again, and see that nothing that comes through is you. And then you start seeing that everything comes through like there's an appearance of a self, and the appearance goes on, but there is no self. And in seeing through that, that's it.